Anything you want to talk about? Otherwise, I can just start talking with. Yeah. Whigs versus Democrats. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So first, who are some of these Whigs and Democrats? Democrats are people like Jackson, Martin Van Buren. Okay, these are our big, the big one's Jackson, right? And Whigs are people like Henry Clay. He's a Northern Whig, and then there's a Southern Whig, Calhoun. We also have people like William Henry Harrison, John Tyler. And so there's a difference between Northern and Southern Whigs, but there is one thing they all agree on. What's that? They all hate Jackson. Okay. And so when we're talking about like what do Whigs believe, it's kind of hard because it's divided, right? There's Northern Whigs and there's Southern Whigs. For Northern Whigs, they are pro-American system. So there's three parts of the American system, which means they're pro to all these things. What are the three parts? What's one? Bank United States. They're pro Bank United States. They're also pro tariffs and pro roads and canals. Also seen in our test as internal improvements. Yep. Go ahead. So those are kind of the big things that they believe. At least those are the things I need you to remember that they're pro-American system. Okay? Whereas the Democrats believe pretty much the opposite about that. They believe they're anti-American system. Right? So they're anti-Bank United States, anti-tariffs, anti-roads and canals. Where do most of the Democrats live? They're mostly in the South and the West. They're more like pro farmers and agriculture, whereas Northern Whigs are more pro business. They have a loose interpretation of the Constitution. So that gives the government more ability to kind of be flexible, do what it needs to get the job done. Whereas Democrats believe in a more strict interpretation where the government can only do what the Constitution says it. Right? So these are kind of our big differences. Now, early on, in like the 1820s, the Democrats are really going to focus on like the common man, right? And so we have like parades and mass meetings. So they're going to do that in like the 1820s. It's going to take a little longer for the Whigs to develop this plan. They're going to do the common man in like the 1840s. And they're specifically there's a specific name for this type of campaigns. I remember what that's called. Log cabin campaign. So where you want to show your candidate as very down to earth, like a normal person. And so they pretend that William Henry Harrison was born in a log cabin when he really wasn't. Or how he drinks the alcohol of the people. What was the alcohol of the people? Hard cider. right? He doesn't drink that champagne stuff. Thank you. That champagne stuff that Martin Van Buren does, right? So it creates this difference between them. They're going to try to out common man each other in the 1840s. It's going to work for William Henry Harrison, where he's a war hero. Martin Van Buren is just a pale shadow compared to Jackson. Okay. I think those are the big things for Whigs versus Democrats. Any questions on that? Okay. Any other big like topics like that you want to discuss? Southern Whigs just think basically all of this, but they don't like Jackson. Should we talk a little bit more about like Jackson's presidency? That? Okay. So before we get to Jackson's presidency, we have to talk about the election before Jackson's presidency. Corrupt bargain. How is that election corrupt? Or allegedly corrupt? Clay swayed the vote. To who? To John Quincy Adams. Even though who got the most votes? Even though Jackson got the most votes. Jackson got the most votes, but because no one got a majority electoral college votes, it goes to the House of Representatives. And Clay, who's the Speaker of the House, swayed the vote. And Jackson said this is unfair. This is an example of how our system is corrupt. Our system is unfair to the common man, to the people. So he's going to really lean into this idea of fighting for the common man so that when he gets elected, he's going to issue policies that are supportive of the common man, according to him. And so to help us, we always want to think about the three parts of the American system. His presidency is going to address each part. There's going to be a situation with each part at least. So the first one, when he does get elected in 1828, is the roads and canals. They simply just stop the funding. Okay, they stop funding. So they're not going to be spending more money on roads and canals. What happened under Jackson's presidency with tariffs? Tariffs went up. Who doesn't like that? The South doesn't like this, right? The South is upset by this. Because remember, the South has to buy the products. Remember, we kept saying when the tariffs are added, the prices go up. And so the South is paying more money for these products, and they don't like this. And so what does South Carolina threaten to do? Threaten to, what is it? Nullify the law. Which remember is just like simply ignoring it. What does Jackson do with this? Like, what does he think? Does he support nullification? Does he not, Dan? Yeah, Jackson doesn't like this. Jackson does not support nullification, even threatens to send the army down there and kill all the nullies. So if you're a Southerner who is in support of nullification, this really turns you against Jackson. It turned Calhoun against Jackson. Calhoun was a nullie. He doesn't like that Jackson used his power as a president, and so he becomes a Whig. He hates Jackson now. But they come up with a compromise and it avoids the situation. But again, this is the issue of national versus state government, where states are saying we have the power to do what we want, and the national government saying no, you don't. Which side did Jackson take on this situation? He took the national side here. Did Jackson always take the national side? No, he didn't with roads and canals. That's a state side. He doesn't like the national government spending all this money. And he won't when it comes to the Bank of the United States. The bank is the thing he hates the most, right? He hates the bank. He thinks it's corrupt. He thinks it's bad for the people. Does anyone remember what he's going to do to kill the bank? Give what? Yep. So he gives gold. He gives gold from the main U.S. bank to the pet banks located usually in the South and in the West that are supportive of Jackson's policies. So now the Bank of the United States does not have the currency to be stable and dependable. People will invest in the bank less now, and the bank has less power to the point when they get to the revote and they're like, nope, we're not going to recertify or recharter the bank. So the bank does. These are the three big things that we talked about with the American system. Under Jackson's presidency, he's going to take kind of a sometimes national perspective, sometimes state perspective. One more thing I wanted to mention is Indian removal. Okay, the Indian Removal Act, where the U.S. government is going to push certain groups of Native Americans out of the eastern part of the United States and into the Great Plains. Does Jackson like this or dislike it? Jackson supports this, right? Even when some states like Georgia are trying to push Native Americans out, and the Supreme Court says, no, that state can't do that. In that sense, who does Jackson support? The Native Americans or the state of Georgia? He supported the state of Georgia. He allowed, hey, Georgia, if you want to move them, you can do that. Where's Georgia in removing Native Americans from their land? So we have this kind of like both sidesism with Jackson, where in some ways he will support the national government, in other ways he'll support the state government, which makes Jackson a complex character. Questions about any of that? Okay. Any other big things for your study guide? You're like, Miss Garth, we talk about this or we talk about that? Do you have a question, Naya? Oh, no. No. I talk about women. Okay. Okay. So, few things are changing in the lives of women in the early 1800s. First, we have The market revolution, where men's work is changing. How is men's work changing because of the market revolution? They go from working at homes to working for a job. They leave home to work. And so that means women's expectation at home is changing. So it leads to a couple things, like this is a historian phrase, the cult of domesticity. This societal pressure for women to take care of the home, take care of the family, because now the men are off at work, and women are expected to stay home and take care of family and kids and the building or the home itself. Okay, that's called domesticity. We also talked about the idea of Republican motherhood. What are women supposed to teach their children? Republican values and morality. How is this kind of ironic, though, that women are teaching children about Republican values? Their political powers themselves have been denied to them, but they're also then expected to teach Republican values to their children. Okay, so women's lives are changing. Not all women are working at home, though. A minority of women are working outside the home. I don't have percentages, but this is probably like 15-20% of women working outside the home. And if they did, they usually worked in factories. Small percentage of women. So if this is the prevailing idea that women should stay at home and teach Republican values, our most recent chapter that everyone would know unless you're in 3B is about how some women are going to try to challenge those current beliefs, like at the Seneca Falls Convention. Where they're going to argue for more political power, like property rights. Suffrage. What's suffrage? Suffrage is voting rights, yeah. In fact, when they're creating their documents to share with the public what they want, they tried to pattern it off of a document everyone knew already, the Declaration of Independence, right? They tried to say, like, instead of just all men are created equal, they say all men and women are created equal. So their document's called the Declaration of Sentiments, okay? But they're going to use language from the Declaration of Independence in their document itself. We also see that many women who are involved in trying to get more women's rights are also going to fight for other changes too. Women are going to be involved in other groups like Dorothea Dix is going to fight for changes to like asylums and hospitals. We're going to see many women are going to turn to the abolition movement and fight for the end of slavery. So that's kind of where we get to in chapter 10, in case you're in 3B, we haven't talked about that. I think that's all I have to say about women, unless there's any questions. Yep. Okay, we'll do this one quick. So during this time period, there's two Supreme Courts. There's one from Marshall, where he's the Chief Justice, and one with Roger Taney. Oop, not. It's pronounced Taney, but not spelled that way. Okay, so when your city guide asks for martial court decisions, this is pro-national decision. Giving the national government more power. When Taney comes in, it's going to be pro-state. Okay, that's what you need to know. So, like we talked about the decision about Georgia and the do they have the right to kick Native Americans out? The Marshall Court was making this decision. They said, nope, only the national government can do that. If that would have been heard just a few years later when Taney was there, it probably would have given the states the power to do. Okay, we will end there today, everybody, because the bell's going to ring in just a minute.